Welcome to today's deep dive. Imagine trying to build a balloon out of a vertebrate. It just shouldn't work. Skeletons are rigid structural things, right?
Yeah, they define a set volume. You can't just stretch them.
Exactly. But today, we are taking you through a stack of biomechanical studies, genomic research, and even some aquarium forums to decode a creature that completely shatters the normal rules of anatomy.
The pufferfish.
The pufferfish.
And, if you've ever watched a nature documentary, you've probably seen one inflate and assumed, like scientists did for decades, actually, that they were just holding their breath to stay puffed up.
Right, because if your stomach stretches out to like 3 or 4 times its normal size, your gills have to be clamped shut to trap the water.
That's what you would think.
There's no way you can keep breathing under that kind of hydrostatic pressure.
The old literature completely agreed with you, but, well, a recent study on the black-saddled pufferfish proves that is an absolute myth. They don't hold their breath at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah. In fact, their gill oxygen uptake increases 5-fold while they're fully inflated.
Okay, let's unpack this. How are they moving water over their gills if their body is essentially a pressurized biological water balloon?
So they use this mechanism called a buccal pump. Instead of relying on passive water flow from swimming, they actively expand and contract their mouth cavity like a bellows.
Like a little air pump.
Exactly. They rapidly gulp water down into a highly distensible stomach, sealing it off with a specialized sphincter, all while continuing to pump fresh water past their gills.
Oh, wow. But if they're breathing at 5 times their normal rate while puffed, that completely changes how I read the data on their recovery.
Right.
Because the research mentions a massive 5.6-hour recovery time after they deflate. I assume that was a massive oxygen debt from the physical strain of maintaining the puff. Is it?
Well, no, the inflation itself isn't the main drain.
It's not.
No, the true exhaustion actually comes from the intense anaerobic burst of sprinting away from the predator right before inflating.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Yeah, combined with the sheer muscular exertion of operating that buccal bellows at top speed in just a matter of seconds.
But expanding a stomach to that extreme brings up a major structural problem. If the stomach inflates that much, shouldn't their own ribs puncture it?
You would certainly think so.
Or what about those terrifying exterior spikes? I'd think those would just rip their skin apart from the inside as it stretches out.
Well, they bypass the rib problem by losing them entirely. Pufferfish underwent an evolutionary loss of their ribs to accommodate that massive internal expansion.
Just completely got rid of them.
Exactly. And as for the spikes, looking through some of the Reddit deep dives and aquarium forums in our sources highlights something super counterintuitive. Those spikes aren't bones attached to a skeleton.
So they're just sitting free-floating in the skin.
Yeah, they are heavily modified scales. Over evolutionary time, they shed their flat, normal cycloid base and became embedded dermal structures.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Turning a flat fish scale into a rigid, armor-piercing spike is a massive biological leap.
It is a huge leap, yeah.
How did their DNA allow for that, without breaking everything else?
They tapped into a pre-existing genetic toolkit called the EDA pathway.
The EDA pathway.
Right. Think of it as a biological signaling network that directs how the outer layer of skin folds, clusters, and hardens to create appendages.
Like hair.
Exactly. It's the exact same underlying mechanism that codes for a bird's feathers or the hair on your head.
So evolution didn't have to invent a spike from scratch. It just took the pathway that makes hair and cranked up the calcium production.
Pretty much, yeah.
But to have the genetic flexibility to alter that pathway so drastically, you need a lot of raw material.
Which they got. Millions of years ago, the ancestors of pufferfish went through a whole genome duplication event.
Wait, so they ended up with a spare copy of their entire genetic code?
Yes, the whole thing.
I thought duplicate genes usually just degrade. Like, if a mutation copies a gene, the duplicate normally breaks down into junk DNA because the original's already doing the job.
What's fascinating here is that most of the time, yes, that's exactly what happens. But here we see a process called neofunctionalization.
Neofunctionalization.
Right. Because the original genes were handling the baseline survival tasks, the duplicate Hox clusters, which are the genes responsible for laying out the fundamental body plan, were free to mutate and experiment.
Which gave them a safe space to evolve.
Exactly. This redundancy allowed them to drastically reduce their vertebrae count and fuse their jawbones without dying out.
And what blows my mind is how early they locked in this bizarre body plan. The sources highlight an Eocene fossil called Eotetridon.
Oh, the tiny one.
Yeah, it was microscopic, only 20 millimeters long, yet it already possessed this complex, fully ossified, ribless structure tens of millions of years ago.
Which tells us that once this genetic gamble paid off, it was highly successful. The duplicate genes established the physical architecture deep in their evolutionary past.
Oh, that is incredible.
And over time, those surviving spare genes kept working, eventually rewiring the nervous system to trigger the specific motor neurons required to operate that rapid-fire Bucker thump.
So this fish didn't just invent a new way to survive. It took an accidental copy of its own genome, used the spare parts to delete its ribs, built a heavy-duty water pump out of its mouth, and weaponized the exact same genes that make human hair to turn its scales into spears.
It's the ultimate example of biological recycling. The genome duplication gave them the breathing room to become one of the most mechanically bizarre vertebrates on the planet.
So what does this all mean?
It means evolution is endlessly creative when given spare parts.
It really is. Which leaves you with something pretty wild to think about. If a tiny fish achieved such extreme shape-shifting defenses just by neo-functionalizing the basic genetic building blocks of skin and a few spare body plan genes,
Yeah.
what dormant, bizarre adaptations might be hiding unexpressed in our own spare human DNA?